Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Hey, you out there. No, not you, Jamie Dimon. I'm talking to the humans out there and the cats and dogs, you know, creatures with a heart and soul, not those that slither around in the sewage at night like Jamie. So I was saying, I have bad news for y'all. We're going extinct. Not our physical bodies. I'm talking about our wages, our wealth, our liberty. Extinct. Groveling for one of Jamie's food stamp cards and fighting for a top bank at Halliburton's Gulag camp is our future. Unless we stop the economics of extinction and rise the frick up. Stacey.
Max, as we are talking about the economics of extinction, I have worn my shirt dedicated to the species that have gone extinct. She used to live in the sewage system under New York City. Her name was Homo Lady. And Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein and all those other slithering creatures moved in and kicked her out, loaded her up with debt. Her whole species has gone extinct.
The purple-haired fairy goddess? Didn't you play for them? That was a punk band in CBGB's. I thought you were the bassist.
Well, yes, we're going to talk about the ever-declining wages of workers around the world, the ever-incarcerated debtor around the world, indebted and enslaved by their debt. First is South Africa. Striking workers burn vineyards in protest over hunger wages. And farmer arrested for firing on thousands of demonstrators. Striking farm workers in South Africa's biggest table grape growing region set fire to more than 30 hectares of vineyards to protest against what they call hunger wages. They apparently only make £5 a day, and one of the strikers says you cannot buy anything with that money.
Well, it's not really hunger wages. These are starvation wages. I think they need to brand their protest a little bit more, accurately. They're starving, which is the wage conflation we see around the world. People are now being forced into this starvation wage gulag mentality, while the top 1% are benefiting from all the money printing.
The likes of the IMF and World Bank will look around the world and say, oh, it's extreme poverty to have $2 a day. It seems like with all of the data collected on us and all of our, footprints around the world, digitally, online, and in the real world, from the various spy organizations, they know exactly to a penny how much we need to just be on the edge of starvation. Remember, Israel does this actually to the occupied territories. They count the calories to like 1 or 2 to keep them just under the calories that they require, not to starve to death immediately, but just to keep surviving. And they seem to know this for our debt levels, how much we can go without completely collapsing. And the same with income.
You mentioned living on $2 a day. I think most people would be surprised that in America, there are now over 7 million people living on $2 a day or less. So this is a growing global trend.
One of the workers said, quote, "The money that they pay us is nothing. We work our whole lives, but still we have nothing. We are working for what? For what?"
Right. Keep in mind, again, central banks print money, but through financial engineering, like putting a dam in a river. Creating lakes at the top for those who are benefiting, but everyone else is being starved to death. And that's what central bank financial engineering is all about, putting financial dams in the system so that when they print money, it never flows to the population that's not benefiting from massive insider trading and manipulation.
Now, the really interesting thing about this article and about this protest is that comparing it to the global insurrection against banker occupation. Because the fact is that the strike started on the 30th of October, 2012, when farm laborers stopped work and delivered a memorandum to the Western Cape government demanding higher wages. But they claim the government only paid attention when the vineyards started to burn.
Well, that's the economics of extinction, which we'll be talking about throughout this entire show. It's more costly for the financial terrorists to burn people, to incinerate them, than to keep them 1 calorie within a subsistence level and doing some numbnuts job. So that's the economics involved.
Well, I think it's also a fact that, we've been trained and propagandized through media is that today, in today's world, post-American Revolution, post-French Revolution. We live in democracies, so there's no reason why you should not be happy with your free speech zones over there to make your protest known. That 2 million people, the most ever in the history of Britain to march in a protest, marched on Downing Street, for example, and Tony Blair said, "Oh, I love democracy, it's so quaint," and continued to go to war and bomb and kill a million other people. So your protests mean nothing.
Well, you know, freedom means economic freedom. Benjamin Franklin, of course, said one of the reasons America revolted against Britain was to escape the Bank of England. He also said a penny saved is a penny earned. Today, the central bankers castigate savers as being the enemy, and they glorify borrowers and speculators as their heroes.
So we're in South Africa, and you see wages are not enough to keep up with the cost of inflation of food goods, for example. They can't feed themselves. They can't house themselves. So let's turn to America. Median household incomes, the real story. And we're going to turn to these charts here, and you see that's the median household income in the 21st century. The blue line is the inflation-adjusted number. And if you can see, it's been dropping precipitously since 2000, but at the peak of the median household incomes was $56,101, and it is now $51,310. So you've lost 10% of real median household income.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Money is being printed, but it's staying in the asset class of those who are the financial engineers who have re-architected the global financial system, putting in these financial dams so that they are benefiting from asset price appreciation, but the money that they print, the M1 figures that are expanding around the world, never find their way into wages, never find their way below the top speculative banking class.
And now remember, I said that they have such advanced technology now to monitor you to the exact single penny that will break your camel's back, your household camel back. And so they know how to tweak exactly and keep you enslaved and terrified of losing your health insurance, of losing your job, of losing any sort of income to sustain your debt. Because the article says, the stunning reality illustrated here is that the real median household income series spent most of the first 9 years of the 21st century struggling slightly below its purchasing power at the turn of the century.
Well, this is what social networking is all about. The Facebook and Twitter and these other database-enabled surveillance technologies, they're being sold as a way to keep people safe. But they're actually a way to monitor people's caloric intake and their spending habits to keep them just 2 or 3 calories above subsistence so that they can keep these people just barely alive to continue the slave state of being forced consumers. In the old days, the way the dictators operated, they had forced workers. But now in the new age, we have forced consumers that are being forced to go into debt to consume to keep the dictators alive and happy.
So again, what they said is the income, the median household income, was slightly below its purchasing power, i.e. just keeping you slightly, slowly starving. Not so that you would know, but that you are a frog in that famous pan of water. If you don't know it's boiling when you get in there, you don't know to save yourself, to rise up, to protect yourself, to do something different. You just like slowly, painfully decline into a deflationary collapse, as we've seen in Japan.
Right, that's been going on now since 2000, since they brought in the Commodity Futures Modernization Act.
Exactly.
Under Clinton, which allowed this type of financial engineering to go hyperbolic, to go on steroids. Now, for the past 10 years, there is one currency that has stayed ahead of that inflationary trend, and that is, of course, silver. And, Stacey, I just ordered for 1 million of these ounces. It says global insurrection against banker occupation right here on these new Keiser ethical silver rounds. I just ordered 1 million for 2013. And this is, of course, the only way people have been able to fight back and maintain their wealth against banking terrorists on Wall Street in the City of London.
Well, speaking of the City of London, Max, we were just talking about earning just slightly below purchasing power. But, of course, that slightly below across 6.5 billion human beings has been your wealth has been extracted, your wealth is going extinct, but it's been transferred to somebody else, and that is the likes of the City of London. Hedge funds reap record profits from bets on QE. QE is, of course, quantitative easing, i.e. money printing by the Bank of England, by the European Central Bank, by the Federal Reserve Bank, by the Bank of Japan. Super-rich hedge fund financiers emerged as the big winners from the Bank of England's money printing program in 2012, as pensioners and savers were made to struggle with shrunken incomes.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. The hedge funds, these are basically parasites that sit as gatekeepers that are part of the architecture that's been re-engineered. The central bank prints trillions of dollars, and then it gives them the money to these hedge funds, or the primary dealers, as they're known, or interbank dealers, as they're known. They hoard the cash. They're benefiting. They pay themselves hundreds of billions in bonuses, but the money never gets to the general population. That's kept just 2 or 3 calories above starvation.
Now, the real median household income peaked at $56,000. That was in 2009, right when the Bank of England started to pump 375 billion pounds of money into the economy starting in 2009. So it's no wonder that your incomes have declined by 10% since then. And in this article here about the UK, Saga, the pensioner lobby group, has claimed that QE has contributed to a 9% drop in real incomes among the over 50s since early 2008.
At 375 billion sounds like a lot of money until you consider that it's actually less than the roughly 400 billion pounds that HSBC laundered for Mexican drug cartels. So to give you an idea of the extent to which the big 4 banks here in the UK are involved in financing money laundering, terrorism, and market manipulation.
So again, it's not just the likes of us and Occupy Wall Street and activists around the world that are the ones saying you are going to become economically extinct. They speak to a hedge fund expert in this article. He says, while economic fundamentals have been poor during 2012 with sluggish or negative growth and depressed confidence, the use of QE has pumped tons of money into the system, which has to go somewhere. So it usually winds up in equities or bonds. It's the economics of extinction for one class into another.
Right, and those who talk about capitalism versus socialism think socialism has something to do with the control of the means of production, that is to say, labor, but they don't realize that we've gone well past the idea of having labor. We only have debt, consumer, and speculators. We're in a post-capitalist world run by charlatans and manipulators. All right, Stacey Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Put your hats and coats on and bundle up, because in the second half we're heading to Antarctica to speak with Captain Paul Watson, at war with the Japanese whaling fleet in the Southern Ocean.
Do we speak your language? Want news, programs and documentaries in Arabic? It's all here on RT. Reporting from the world's hotspots, VIP interviews, intriguing stories. Are you here? Then try RT Arabic. To find out more, visit arabic.rt.com.
More news today. Violence has once again flared up.
These are the images the world has been seeing from the streets of Canada.
Giant corporations rule the day.
Divine power in action. Activate the chakras. I am Jesus.
We are under the control of those governing us, who are at the service of a space mafia.
I found that on that day the magnetic field of the sun will reverse, and that will create the super catastrophe.
After the second coming, it'll be a beautiful place. It will receive its paradisical glory. It will be a renewed world, and it'll be a beautiful place. Bulletproof vest, it'll stop this type of ammunition.
It's good business for us. It's kind of like being a doctor, you know. If there's a disaster, business is better, unfortunately.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Antarctica to talk with Captain Paul Watson of the Sea Shepherd. Captain Paul, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Well, thank you.
All right, Captain Paul Watson, you are down in the Southern Ocean to stop the Japanese whaling vessels from catching their quota. But there is a twist to the story this year in that you are also on the run. And the Japanese are armed with lots of money from donations and aid that was supposed to go to the Fukushima disaster. Tell us about it.
They allocated about $30 million from the Tsunami Relief Fund specifically to target Sea Shepherd, and with that money, they've thrown an army of lawyers at us. They were able to get an injunction against us in the U.S. 9th District Court, which really doesn't mean anything because our ships are Australian and Dutch ships operating out of Australia. And also they managed to get me on the Interpol red list. Nobody's actually extradited, to my knowledge, for trespassing, but that's what they're trying to charge me with. And they want me extradited to Japan, where I probably will never leave if they do get me there.
All right, so Captain Watson, people who watch the show, whale wars, of course, on television is a huge international sensation. And one of the biggest features, of course, are the actual vessels themselves, the boats. What are we going to look forward to this campaign? Anything new on with the boats?
Well, here's is the strongest we've ever been. We'll be going down to the Southern Ocean with 4 ships, the Steve Irwin, the Bob Barker, the Bridget Bardot, and our new ship, the Sam Simon, which is actually a bit of an embarrassment for the Japanese because we bought it from the Japanese government, and it was part of the whaling fleet. So we now have one of their ships in our fleet. So they're going down with 4 ships. We're going down with 4 ships. So we're evenly matched this year. They want to kill 1,000 whales, and our objective is to make sure they don't kill any. And that's why we're calling it Operation Zero Tolerance.
All right, so in Japan, of course, politically things have changed. They have a new prime minister who has decided to go on a war footing with China. That was part of his election campaign, is that he would pick a fight with China, and they're on a war footing there, so they've gotten very much more aggressive. Do you think that this poses new dangers for Sea Shepherd this year?
It does. The prime minister is a roving prime minister who happens to hail from the same town where the whaling fleet is from, and he's very pro-whaling. And last year, the prime minister then said that they weren't going to surrender for Sea Shepherd. So they're actually putting us in the same category as China. It's sort of flattering in a way. They're actually treating our non-government organization like they're a nation they're at war with, and they've been very, very hostile. So we don't really know what to expect. We do know that they have armed Coast Guard on board their vessels. That's a violation of the Antarctic Treaty, but nobody seems to be doing anything about it. So we have no idea what we're going to face, but no matter what they throw at us, our objective is to make sure they don't kill any whales, and that's what we intend to do.
Okay, and of course, when we're talking whales, we're talking about different species of whales. What species of whales are in the area, and how close are they to extinction?
They're targeting 935 minke whales. These are Antarctic minke whales, which are protected species. They're targeting 50 fin whales, which are an endangered species. But more importantly, this is the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary, established by the International Whaling Commission as a sanctuary for whales. And so I don't know what it is about the word sanctuary that Japan doesn't seem to understand. But you don't kill whales in a sanctuary. So this is really about Sea Shepherd defending the integrity of the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. If we can't protect sanctuaries and marine reserves, then we're not going to protect anything.
All right, now, Captain Watson, the last time you were on the Keiser Report, you spoke about what you call the economics of extinction. Now, since that broadcast, I've seen some reports coming out of Japan talking about bluefin tuna, which are being fished to extinction, but the bluefin tuna that are in the freezer, because they're being fished to extinction, the price goes up quite dramatically, almost exponentially, because after all, these will be the last species left after this particular species is fished into extinction, so the price goes up. There's a very strange, macabre relationship between economics and extinction. You were the first to really talk about this. Can you explain a little bit more on this?
We've had a couple of campaigns to oppose bluefin tuna in the Mediterranean. And what we found is that, this is the most expensive fish in the world. One bluefin tuna averages $75,000 and some is sold for up to $300,000 a piece. But what Mitsubishi and other companies are doing is they're stockpiling these fish and quick freezing them in warehouses, and they've got a 5-6 year supply. They like to get about a 10-year supply. And if the fish become diminished, the price rises. They become more valuable. And if the fish becomes extinct, they'll be sitting at a priceless commodity, and they raise billions of dollars over that. So they're really investing in the extinction of the species. They probably would like nothing better. It's the same thing they're doing with ivory. They're hoarding that, knowing that with elephants diminishing and possibly going extinct, that'll also be a priceless commodity. So it's a rather sick sort of economic enterprise, but a lot of nations are involved in it. The same thing it also includes shark finning and the killing of sharks to the Chinese market.
Right. So in economic terms, this would be, I guess, called a perverse incentive, in that you're fishing and hunting something to extinction to get the price higher. And as you pointed out, this is expanding to other species. And let me ask you about the volunteers on Sea Shepherd. Of course, they have a love of the whale. That's quite clear when you watch the show of the whale wars on the Animal Planet. But is there also an incentive to save themselves? Because if this idea of economics of extinction is applied across the economic front, it means that humans themselves are being targeted by this perverse economic system. Your thoughts, Captain Watson?
Well, we have 120 crew volunteers from 24 different nations, including Japan, on board our vessels. And they're not just for the whales, but for the understanding that diminishment of biodiversity in our oceans is going to lead to the death of our oceans. And if the oceans die, we die. And we can't live on this planet with a dead ocean. So it really is about self-preservation. It's not just protecting whales and sharks and turtles. It's protecting the entire biodiversity of this oceanic ecosystem, everything from the plankton to the great whales. And I think it's probably one of the most serious issues facing our future, because a healthy ocean is what makes us healthy as a species. And it doesn't matter where you live on land. If the oceans die, we die.
All right, now, Captain Watson, you have really carved out a new battle plan for ecologists. Of course, you were one of the founders of Greenpeace, but at some point you decided that approach was too bureaucratic, perhaps, and not really taking the fight to where it needed to go. And here you are, you're in the Southern Ocean. You're actually at war with these Japanese whalers who are violating international law, or violating all kinds of laws pertaining to sanctuary. And since you've been down there doing this fight, we have seen the Arab Spring. We've seen Occupy Wall Street. We've seen the nature of activism go from holding up a peace sign to taking the fight to the front line. Has there been any attempt, or is there any idea that what you're doing down there in the Southern Ocean is connected to this global insurrection against this economics of extinction? I realize that's a bit of a long-winded question, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think that we're politically connected in any ways. We're not a social movement in that way. We're an ecological movement. We don't really have any politics when you think about it that way. We're here to protect and uphold the laws of ecology and nothing else. But I think people are becoming more frustrated with the fact that government is sold out to corporations. I mean, I refer to my own government in the United States as an oiliocratic oligarchy, government of the oil companies for the oil companies, because they seem to, call shots. But everywhere we look, there's corporations that are exploiting everything on the planet, the rainforest to the oceans, without any thought as to what the consequences are for future generations. And if we're going to have a future for humanity, we have to take into account that we just simply cannot destroy all these resources for the benefit of a few now.
Let me ask you about the reaction in Japan. Initially, the reaction in Japan, I believe, from what I gather from the media reports, was that the Sea Shepherd was portrayed in a very unfavorable light and quite threatening to the economy there. But over the years, I think there's been a change of heart in the Japanese community themselves, or is that not the case? What's been the reaction in Japan itself, the local Japanese community? Surely there's people in Japan who understand the situation is beyond just whales. It incorporates the entire ecosystem and the entire economy. Your thoughts?
We have Japanese supporters, Japanese crew members, and 6 years ago, nobody was even aware this was a problem in Japan, and now there's a controversy, there's a discussion, people are questioning the government about it, and Japanese people are getting involved. Quite excited about that, and 35 years ago, we were taking on the whalers in Australia. We were fighting whalers at sea, confronting them off of Western Australia. Well, Australia was a whaling nation. Now it's one of the most passionate nations defending whales. And my hope is that Japan will be the same in a few years.
All right. So tell us about the mission itself this year, Captain Watson. You've got quite an assembly of vessels. And I guess, as always, for those who watch the show, Whale Wars, the idea is always to get on the tail of the factory ship, or get on the right and back of it early to shut down the ship. Is that the strategy again this year, or can you divulge any new strategy? What's the mission this year, Captain?
Well, this year we have 4 ships, a helicopter, 3 drones, military-style drones for reconnaissance, 120 crew members. And the best way to stop whaling is to get onto the stern of the slipway of the factory ship, prevent them from loading dead whales. If they can't load dead whales, they can't kill them. That's been the most effective strategy, also to keep them on the run, to keep chasing them. Now, the interesting thing is, what makes it more difficult this year is that the United States has ordered us to not approach within 500 yards of any of the whaling vessels. And Sea Shepherd Australia is actually quite confused by that. They wonder how the U.S. court can order Australian vessels to not interfere with Japanese whalers in the Australian Antarctic territory. So the long and the short of it is the U.S. court probably have no jurisdiction at all.
All right, well, Captain Watson, thanks very much for being on the Keiser Report. We wish you luck down there. I take it that the best way people could participate in this would be to maybe send donations through the website. Is that the best way people can help out?
Let's just contact us through seashepherd.org.
All right, fantastic. And as always, Godspeed, good luck, and hopefully we'll talk to you when you're actually in the Southern Oceans in the mission. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can tweet us at Keiser Report or at facebook.com/Keiser Report. Till next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.